down and as the tides continue to rise. This was their hope, to find the mysterious and super rare heart of the sea object, the one thing that they believed could save them. And with the waters quickly rising into their homes, there was no place left to turn, no other solution. They had to find this object, myth or otherwise. So they sent out their ships by the hundreds, carrying their maps and fishing gear, desperately searching the waves, knowing that the lives of their loved ones hang in the balance. And as you can imagine, many aren't able to survive the journey. You'll notice that there are many shipwrecks sprinkled along the bottom of the ocean, broken husks of boats that contain those treasure maps, ships wrecked upon the rocks or sucked down by whirlpools in the sea. Meanwhile, those left at home collect nautilus shells, the other ingredient necessary to build those conduits, ready to make the conduit once one person, one sailor finds that elusive heart of the sea, but it never comes. No one ever discovers it. Help never arrives back home. That's why we never find a naturally existing conduit in the world. And so this fishing society sinks, their buildings and monuments get swallowed by the waves, the fishermen cast out and buried in the sea. They become, literally, the drowned. Without the conduit's power, they choke on the waters of the ocean. They become the undead that continue to haunt and fish in bodies of water to this day. That's why they swim at our speed. They don't have the power of haste. That's why they still carry their nautilus shells, waiting and ready for when someone finally finds that one last item that could have saved them. It's also why, when you, as the player, are finally able to find that part of the sea and construct a conduit, the name of the achievement is an odd one. Muskstrome, the name of one of the world's strongest tidal currents that's located in Norway. Is odd, right? But in English, it's translated as the maelstrom, a body of water so violent, so turbulent, that it inspired countless fictional authors. It's the raging currents that swallowed up Captain Nemo and Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. It's mentioned by Captain Ahab and Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and it's here in Minecraft as an achievement for doing what the drowned could never do. Survive the maelstrom of the rising waters, the waves that would rip apart a society, and finally conquer the waves. But hey, that's just a theory. A game. Thanks for watching. What are the Illagers doing in that dank, secluded mansion of theirs? With its redstone jails, elaborate altars, and hidden rooms housing strange obsidian structures, it really seems like they're plotting something. That is a quote from Marsh Davies, former creative communications manager for Mojang, in his introduction to the Evoker mob back when it was introduced in 2017. It's a line that is outright challenging us. It's telling us there's something hidden within the walls of the Illagers' Woodland Mansion compound. There's a mystery to be solved out there in those dark forests. One that, according to my research, has gone unanswered that entire time. Now, 3 years later, I think I've done it. I think I know what the Illagers are doing out there. More importantly, I think I know what they're planning. Let's just say, after today's video, you will never hit Minecraft the same way again. Hello, Internet! Welcome to Game Theory, the most bingeable show on YouTube for all those times when you find yourself inexplicably stuck inside with nothing else to do. Speaking of bingeable content, over the last year, we've been mining for nuggets of lore to craft together a massive overarching theory on the story of Minecraft. I'll link to all those theories right there in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I recommend starting with our analysis of the Endermen, as well as this one covering the origins of the drowned civilization. Here's the thing though, up until this point, you as the viewer, and quite honestly me too, have been uncertain what, if anything, has actually been planned by the Mojang team working on Minecraft. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think we have done some incredible work piecing together a lore for this game, from the Endermen being the lost builders, to the drowned being a civilization running away from a massive flood. The proof has been there in the gameplay, and yet the question has remained, how much of this lore was intended versus how much of it was just me theory crafting by putting together random details to make a coherent story? Today, though, is different. I started this episode with that quote from Marsh Davies for a reason. It shows that the developers intended some hidden lore to exist around the Woodland Mansions. The Illagers do indeed have something of those oversized sleeves of theirs. This time, it's not just us overanalyzing things like we normally do, it's us piecing together clues to solve a secret that has remained hidden in this game for years. And maybe it's been for a good reason. Because if I'm right, the secret that the Illagers are hiding takes this family-friendly game and makes it a much, much darker world. We're talking T for teen at least. I think the Illagers are kidnapping villagers and turning them into animals. some bizarre magic. That's not all. I think they're going one step further. They're taking those experiments to try and recreate Steve. Now, if you've never been to a woodland mansion before, I don't exactly blame you. The chance of one generating is extremely low, as they only generate in the rare dark forest biome. And even then, only if it fulfills a certain list of criteria, and you're lucky to boot. That's why even with the maps that you can buy from the cartographer villagers, you still might find yourself trekking for hours to find the nearest mansion. So it's pretty safe to say that these are some of the rarest structures in the game. Entering the mansion, things seem pretty normal at first. The entrance hall is pretty much always the same. It has a nice red carpet, some stairs, and as you go through, you're likely to see lots of normal-looking rooms, ones that appear to be dining halls, libraries, little farms of mushrooms and trees, but then you get to some of the stranger structures. Jail cells, a room with a large altar in the middle, a room with a large fake map in the middle, a room with a large fake end portal in the middle, rooms dedicated to large woolen statues of cats and chickens in the middle, always in the middle. It is weird. And let me be clear, when I say fake end portals and fake maps, I mean it. These aren't made from your typical assortment of end portal frames and lava blocks or paper and compasses. These are made with wool. The fake end portal rooms are filled with orange wool in the middle and a ring of green wool above it, giving the appearance of a stronghold end portal. The map is made out of carpet. So are the numerous beds found throughout the mansion. More wool, more carpet. Again, it is weird. I say it on a lot of these episodes, but I think in this one it's hard to deny. Developers don't just put fake replicas of an end portal into the villain's hideout for the funsies. There is a reason these structures are here. But to understand why, we first need to understand who the Illagers are. For those of you who don't know, Illager is the classification for a group of hostile mobs in Minecraft united by the fact that they all share similar features to normal villagers. The Illagers consist of magic-using evokers, axe-wielding vindicators, and crossbow-slinging pillagers. There's also illusioners, who don't spawn naturally in the game, and the ravagers, which are just the big ol' ugly beasts that the Illagers ride during the raids. Oh, look at that face. Face only a mother, or I suppose another villager would love. Now, it's important to note that the Illager appearance isn't arbitrary. Sure, they look exactly like villagers in need of a suntan, but that is a very intentional decision. It isn't like Mojang just ran out of ideas for how creatures in this universe could look. No, the one bit of lore that we know about these guys is that they're exiles. They were booted out of the villagers' villages. They're outcasts. According to the Minecraft mob bestiary, quote, the evokers are outcasts from the friendly villages that we know and love, twisted by their practice of evil, end quote. And again, with the Vindicator description, here we go. Like the evokers, the Vindicators were expelled from villages for its unspeakable activities, and it too wanders the halls of the eerie woodland mansions. We do not know what they're trying to achieve out there in the woods, but we must be on our guard. So again, we're teased with little bits of lore here. These are villagers who are committing unspeakable acts and were booted out of the towns for it, only to take residence in the dark woods, but we have no idea what all that is referencing. So we come back to the initial question. What were they doing? In the woodland mansions, we have prisons and altars built by the Illagers, but what was it all for? Well, what if I told you that the first, and yes, there are several, but the first atrocity is that the Illagers are kidnapping normal, peaceful villagers and turning them into animals. Don't believe me? Take a closer look at the Ravagers I mentioned earlier. The beasts that the Illagers ride in battle. Look familiar? They should. Most obviously, there's that signature nose that completely matches a normal villager. Okay, fine. That would just be an aesthetic choice. But then, what about the eyebrow? Ravagers have a unibrow, just like every other villager that exists in Minecraft. What makes that similarity stand out all the more is that both the Vindicator and the Evoker, who we know are former villagers themselves that were exiled, have themselves two separate angry eyebrows, clearly differentiating them from every other villager in the game. And yet the Ravager shares the unibrow that the villagers still possess. And what about those green eyes? Again, every villager has green eyes, just like the eyes of the Ravagers. So, the features of the Ravager's face are an exact copy of the features on a villager's face, but to say that they are a villager seems to be an extreme jump, right? It does, until you listen to this. That's one of the Ravager's roars. It's this big, fearsome beast that has a little honk, honk, honk at the end of its roar. A honk that sounds kind of like the sounds that a villager makes when it's speaking. In fact, a lot of the Ravager sound effects seem to have an undertone of honking to it. Again, listen to those grunts and roars. The honking is very clearly worked into the sounds that the beast is making, suggesting that, along with the visuals, this was once an actual villager. But to me, the biggest piece of evidence doesn't come from the game itself, but rather from a tweet sent by Jeb, Chief Creative Officer for Minecraft. One of the odd little details about Ravagers was that when they were first introduced, they were programmed to be scared of rabbits. It was a cute little Easter egg to have a giant, hulking, fearsome beast suddenly run away from such a cute little animal. But when it was first discovered, Jeb, who, again, it bears repeating, is one of the main guys controlling everything Minecraft, Jeb tweeted back this. I asked Josh to remove this feature again. Although funny, being scared of rabbits doesn't fit with the beast's lore. End quote. Doesn't fit with the lore? Ravager lore is non-existent. Literally, in the Meet the Ravager blog post, there is nothing about how these characters fit into the story. The various bestiaries and wikis, nothing about the lore of these mobs. Sure, there are stories about how they were originally conceptualized, what they're based off of, but nothing about the lore as they fit into the story of Minecraft. And yet, apparently, the lore exists enough for the rabbit scaring it off to somehow throw off that entire plot line. And I think I know why. I think it's because they're made of villagers. And villagers aren't scared of rabbits, so the beast that they are turned into by the illagers shouldn't scare them either. In short, I think the prison cells and those sacrificial looking altar things in the woodland mansions are used for when evokers and vindicators capture villagers to use in their, how did the mob bestiary put it, unspeakable activities. I mean, between the magic and the axe, those two mobs should have pretty much everything they need to convert a villager into a giant hulking beast. Well, everything but the power over life and death. That would probably be helpful if you're trying to create some sort of weird animal villager hybrid monstrosity. Oh wait, the illagers actually have that ability too. You see, evokers hold power over life and death considering that they're the only source of totems of undying in the game. These totems are special items that allow the wielder to escape from death. And that, my friends, is the true plan of the illagers. Sure, they might be making beasts out of villagers, but I believe that's only one component of their larger overarching plan. I think that the unspeakable activities that got them kicked out of the villages in the first place are actually them running experiments trying to harness the powers of life and death. They are literally playing God. I mean, they have totems of undying. They are the only ones to have totems of the undying. And we see that these things work. I mean, they certainly managed to keep us alive. Plus, we know that magic is a real thing in Minecraft. Obviously, in the game, we're able to enchant weapons and armor using lapis lazuli. So Minecraft is making the case that lapis lazuli has some sort of mystical power. Now, this isn't a totally novel idea. Humans dating back all the way to ancient Sumeria have also believed that lapis had some sort of mystical quality. The Sumerians believed that lapis held the souls of gods. And all of that seems pretty darn relevant considering where lapis lazuli is hidden in the woodland mansions. While it's not obvious, there is a block of lapis hidden in the center of the giant wool illager heads that decorate the entire building, implying there to be this close connection between illagers and this magical stone. I mean, in the statues, it's literally right where their brain should be. Now, I cannot stress enough how bad of an idea it would be to actually inject lapis lazuli into your head. There's nearly a 100% chance of medical complication and a 0% chance of you getting magical powers, but in the Minecraft universe, it seems like the odds are a bit more in your favor considering the evoker's magical powers. Could all of these statues be implying that evokers have lapis literally implanted into their skulls, thereby giving them their magical abilities? Probably not. If that were the case, you'd expect them to have some chance of dropping a shard of lapis or something. But the lapis stone being in the middle of the statue's head does imply that maybe experiments with lapis and magic were another thing that got these villagers kicked out and turned into the exiled illagers. Which brings us back to their experiments on life and death. Because here's the thing, I don't think it stops with just the Ravagers. I believe that there's something far more sinister and threatening going on in the woodland mansions that ties together all of these clues while also explaining what happened to get the illagers thrown out of society. In some rooms in woodland mansions, there are piles and piles of blue and cyan wool. Okay, it sounds pretty mundane, but consider the specific coloring of this wool. blue and cyan. They're the same colors as default Steve's clothing. His cyan shirt, his blue pants. I mean, there is really no other reason to have stacks of blue and cyan wools together in a room. It is such a specific item in such a specific set of two colors. I mean, sure, elsewhere in the Woodland Mansion, the Illagers use blue wool sometimes as carpet to make fake beds or maps. But they also use yellow and red wool for those same purposes, and we see none of that in any of the rooms in the Woodland Mansion, and yet we see rooms dedicated to just blue and cyan wool. They are specifically Steve-colored wool piles. Steve and zombie-colored wool piles. Remember, this is a cult with at least some control over life and death. And in the Minecraft world, we see snowmen built with 2 snow blocks and a pumpkin. We see iron golems made by creating a T out of iron and then plopping a pumpkin head on top of that. Now we have ourselves a cult of Illagers who create giant statues in their homes and sometimes even embed lapis lazuli into them. So it's not so much of a stretch to think that they could maybe stack some blue and cyan wool together, plop a pumpkin on top, and hope to create a new Steve. But you see, that's where things probably went terribly wrong. An evoker using a totem of the undying must have tried to make this lump of wool come to life, only to create something twisted and something hungry. The first zombie. As the first zombies came out and started fighting villagers, it's probably no surprise that the weird cultists who created it got booted from society and ended up settling huge distances away in dark and mysterious woodland mansions where they could continue their experiments in private. And now, those same cultists live in harmony with their creations. The Illagers now share their mansions with creepers and skeletons and, of course, their own zombified creations. Be they built from wool and skeletons, be they built from wool and dead bodies. So now we know why the Illagers exist, what makes them fundamentally different from their villager cousins, and why the two populations separated to begin with. Their big evil plot that's been alluded to by the development team since their inclusion in the game is to create their own life, create their own version of Steve using a combination of wool and magic. But in the process, it created zombies. They're like the Elric brothers of Minecraft. Who knew that it would take more than a few bits of wool to make a human? And now everyone in the Minecraft world has to pay a price. And that, my friends, is the secret of the Woodland Mansion. But... Okay, I give up. These guys don't have some sort of secret language like the Endermen. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're just idiots. Hello, Internet, and welcome to a diet theory. And unlike all the other theories that I've claimed are diet theories, this time I really mean it. I am not joking around. These mini theories were originally meant to be a smaller episode exploring new fun angles on recent topics that didn't fit into the main theory. Oh, man. Oh, that is a funny joke. Oh, man, that was a good one. Oh, no. It was just a funny joke! Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, the show that's as relentless as an iron golem defending a village from a hostile mob, and about as effective as a snow golem trying to do the same thing. So last year around this time, we started to do a big series of videos on Minecraft lore, and while we've covered way too much for me to summarize here, I am so done with literally every game being a zombie survival game. I get it, The Walking Dead was a popular franchise. 2010 called, they want their genre back. Give me something new, you know?
Totally. Hey, you want to go gather some resources?
Sure.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine. You're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because...
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, where we're all blockheads. Before we begin today's episode, a quick reminder that this Tuesday, December 1st, is the big show that I have been hyping up for the last month. We are doing our big $1 million challenge to benefit St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and their mission of ending childhood cancer. It is a stream that has been a year in the making. A stream that'll feature favorite creators of yours like Mr. Beast, Marquez Brownlee, Jaden Animations, Pokimane, and Minecraft speedrunner speedrunner dream. Tune in for a massive all-day show featuring video games, really embarrassing challenges, a lot of fun surprises along the way, just something that you are not going to want to miss. It is a new show every hour on the hour. It is very elaborate, but man, is it going to be fun. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about some of the changes that were added with the Nether update earlier this year, and then using that information to go back and examine one of the oldest parts of Minecraft, the zombie. Zombies are such an omnipresent part of pop culture nowadays that it's easy to overlook them, which is kind of ironic considering what made them explode onto the scene in the first place was how horrific they were. And now they're mundane again, such as the Circle of Life, or the Circle of Undead. It's a circle of undead. And of course, the zombie jockeys are just always terrifying. Those things will mess you up. Anyway, in all of my exploration of Minecraft lore up to this point, I've tended to skip over them for exactly that reason. They're just kinda there. Meh, generic hostile mob. In a world full of fire-breathing dragons, three-headed withers, exploding moss monsters, and teleporting Slenderman, there's just so many other cooler things to talk about. Zombies are just very easy to overlook, but you know what? That was dumb of me. Short-sighted, because they are the bedrock upon which Minecraft is built. In a very literal sense, these guys have been a part of the game since the beginning in update 0.2.0. So if anything has an importance to the lore, it's probably them. And you know what? They do. With some of the updates made to the Nether, I believe we now have some very interesting leads as to what zombies are and how they play into the overall narrative of the game. Today we're talking about how the zombies and other zombified mobs might just be the most important clues for discovering what may have pushed an ancient race of builders to flee the overworld and live in the end. One of the things that sent me down this rabbit hole was reading Minecraft the Island, an official Minecraft novel. Yes, in absence of new FNAF books, I've now moved on to Minecraft novels. Yeah, I'll get to you guys too. Maybe. Anyway, the book was a surprisingly compelling read. I have expected this to be some lazy video game tie-in novel, but it's so much more than that. For one thing, it's written by Max Brooks, who you might know as the author of World War Z, one of the best zombie apocalypse stories in recent memory. It certainly was enough to get my attention, and once I started reading, it became clear to me that he was chosen to emphasize the horror of Minecraft's world. Take this excerpt. I stopped and backed away. Its clothes were ragged and filthy. Its flesh was a mottled green. Its eyes, if you could call them eyes, were nothing but lifeless black points in a flat, unmoving face. Memories flooded my mind. Images of creatures I'd known from stories but had never seen in person. And here it was, approaching me with outstretched arms. Numb with fear, I sprinted for the hill. I wasn't thinking, wasn't planning. Terror drove my every step. This is a Minecraft book. Like, what? Oh, and by the way, the audiobook is narrated by Jack Black. So, you know, imagine that terrifying passage, but instead of being read by professional YouTuber MatPat, it's being read by professional YouTuber Jablinski Games.
Five Nights at Freddy's, that's where I wanna be.
Professional FNAF YouTuber Jablinski Games. So let's begin with what we know about Minecraft zombies. For one thing, they only seem to spawn in the overworld. There are some reports of them spawning in the Nether, but those are extremely few and can never really be replicated. It's thought to be either a bug or a remnant from some mods. But if they are indeed limited to the overworld, along with their variants like the Husk and the Drowned, that prompts the most obvious question of why? Why do they only exist in the overworld? One explanation I've seen tossed around online would be that the zombies are just zombified villagers, and as such, you'll only find them in places where you find other villagers, aka the overworld. But the fact that zombie villager exists as a separate mob type with its own look kinda throws that theory under the bus. Why do zombie villagers look like villagers and normal zombies look just like us? These zombies seem to be the zombified remains of builders like Steve, and yet, like the zombie villagers, these OG zombies, or vanilla zombies, tasty zombies, are only found in the overworld. If zombies are truly the remains of dead players, or a race of ancient builders from the past, or whatever, why wouldn't you find zombies anywhere that Steve-like builders are able to go, like the Nether and the End? It's suspicious. Well, I think the answer to this question lies in the behavior of another mob, the zombified piglin. We actually talked about the zombie piglin previously on the channel, back before the 1.16 Nether update, and since then there have been some, noteworthy new changes with this particular particular mob. Back when I did my first video on them, there was really no explanation for what could have created humanoid zombie pigs. The only thing that we had to go on was that they spawned when lightning struck near a pig. And since then, as the Mojang team has further developed the piglin mob, it appears as though Minecraft wants that feature removed. Quote from lead creative designer Jeb on Twitter, @Jeb, will pigs struck by lightning become zombified piglin or regular piglin? Jeb's reply, we will likely remove that feature because it'll work differently. This tells me that even though, as I write this, lightning near a pig still spawns a zombified piglin, it's more a thing that's been grandfathered in as an Easter egg to OG players, but no longer represents the new lore that they have in mind for this particular mob type. So what spawn mechanic does reflect how piglins, not pigs, canonically become zombified piglins? Visiting the overworld. I'm serious. If you take a piglin out to the overworld or the end, after 15 seconds, they turn into a zombified piglin, just as a result of standing in the overworld and breathing. And I mean that literally. It seems like the only plausible explanation for what could be happening here, that the piglins, upon traveling to the overworld, begin breathing in something that just magically turns them from a perfectly well-functioning living creature into a flesh-starved zombie. It's bizarre. Something about being in the overworld turns piglins into zombies. As I see it, the only explanation for this is some sort of airborne zombie virus. Now, that might seem crazy at first. After all, we and the villagers are all able to run around in the overworld all day, breathing in the same air without turning into zombies. So what gives? Well, that question is best answered by turning to some very real and some very tragic history. As you might have learned in your history class, when European colonists came to America and started interacting with the native population, it didn't go well for the indigenous Americans. In fact, it's estimated that over 90% of indigenous Americans were killed in the decades that followed. It's just horrific. But why I bring this up today is how they died. Because while the Europeans that settled in America certainly did kill plenty of indigenous Americans in warfare, most were killed by diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza. Diseases that were common in Europe, but completely new to the indigenous population of the New World. In many cases, they weren't even getting these diseases from people who were displaying symptoms of the sickness. The European explorers were asymptomatic carriers of the diseases, a concept that, in 2020, a lot of us have become all too familiar with. These were all diseases that Europeans had been dealing with for generations, and with each passing generation, the people who managed to survive dying from some terrible epidemic passed on their antibodies and immunities to their descendants. With each generation, Europeans gained stronger and stronger immune systems, which meant that formerly devastating diseases were no longer quite so deadly. So when the Europeans brought these diseases to the New World, exposing a population whose ancestors had no opportunity to build up those same immunities, the results were devastating. But there's a part of this story that might strike some people as a gaping hole. Why weren't the Europeans having the same problem? They too were in a new land encountering new people. Why weren't the colonists dying of the American diseases? Well, the answer is cities. Europeans lived in densely packed cities, which were breeding grounds for infection. Another thing that we've seen pretty darn clearly in 2020. I don't know if you've heard about this one. Looks like a lot of people are still missing the memo, but big gatherings of people all packed together in a tight space are one of the easiest ways to spread a virus. Go figure. Social distancing starts to get a whole lot harder when you're all packed together like sardines. And all of that gets compounded far worse when you don't have modern conveniences like plumbing and clean water. If you want an indication of how big a problem water contamination was during this time, it took until 1535 to finally prohibit people from dumping their excrement into the River Thames of London. Yeah, they had to pass a law outlawing you from dumping your poop into the water that ran through its most populous city. Reports from the time say that the water ran black. Really makes you want to reconsider that Riverview property, huh? All of these factors combined make European cities a breeding ground for all kinds of horrible diseases. North America, meanwhile, with its lack of densely populated cities, stood in stark contrast, and hence the indigenous people of North America had no plagues. All of that is a fascinating and frankly tragic look at history, but what relevance does it have in Minecraft? Well, understanding the history of diseases and plagues in the real world, it becomes a lot easier for us to understand how this might happen in the fictional world of Minecraft. Let's just assume for a minute that there is a zombie plague floating around in the air of Minecraft's overworld and end. We don't know how it would have started or why. Maybe it was the result of experiments trying to resurrect the dead like we've talked about in a previous theory. Maybe it was somehow tied to the appearance of the Wither. Who knows? But let's just say that it happened. Well, in those early days,